There. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our class. This is Social Research 2. And last meeting, what we did was to flesh out some of the ideas that came from last term's class of Social Research 1. Today, I'd like to highlight several parts of our research engagement. I kind of I'm thinking that maybe, just maybe, there are some gaps in your knowledge on how to on these items. That's why I'm thinking it may be hard for you to form your ideas on how to do this research. So let's use this map. I like this map a lot. I've shared this with some of you who attended the consultation last Tuesday. So I got this from Nino Leviste of Ateneo. He just got it online as well, but I asked him that if I could use it for my class today. So um, for today in your breakout session, I'll be asking you to provide your provide details on your research on these items that we will be discussing today. Okay, we're good so far. Yes. Okay. So, when you do your research, the first thing that, well, for me, the first thing that guides me is that of my theoretical orientation. Okay. Um, it's immediately what catches my attention on everything. So whatever kind of research that I'm doing, immediately it's my theoretical orientation that leads me to that point. So we have in sociology, we have three major core theoretical orientations, and these are functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism. Can I ask, I'll be calling on people, can I ask you to discuss what is functionalism, symbolic interactionism, conflict theory? Just discuss one part of that. Um, do we do voluntary or do you want me to go on graded recitation? Hmm.
Good morning, Doc.
Hi, good morning.
I
Sorry,
am Michelle Suniga po.
where, how come it doesn't light up? Your name doesn't light up. All right, Michelle. Hi, Michelle. What theory would you like to make sense of?
I would like to talk about structural functionalism theory po.
Okay, go ahead.
So, based on what I've learned po, in structural functionalism theory, society works in systems. They're interdependent parts to each other where they serve as a function to for the society to work as a whole.
All right. So you've got the main definition of structural functionalism. This is one of the most popular theories. Thank you so much, Michelle, for engaging with me. So in functionalism, as Michelle has highlighted, there are several parts or components to a behavior, and these components are related to making sure that the society continues to function, continues to move forward. Some of the most classic examples for this would be, um, let's say, I'm sorry. Now I'm thinking of a lot of examples. Okay, I'll focus on one. The concept of God, for example, it's one of the most debated topics in the concept of functionalism. Why is there a need for the creation of God? And the response for that would be various contexts, like for social order, for psychological well-being. So the concept of God, why did we create God? The answer to that is because we needed to create God so that we could survive our psychological stresses. We created God because the concept of God promotes social order, social cohesion, because there's the fear that a deity is actually watching over you and gonna make you suffer. So, or will reward you. So, function. Every part of society has a function. And of course, there's a weakness to this theory, and the weakness is that not everything has a function apparently, and or everything has a function. It's just that why do we select one behavior to rise above others? For example, sure, we want social order, so we decided God will be that. But there are other functional things in society that could promote social order. Why did we still create God? So that's something that functionalism cannot answer for. I want you to remember that every single theory has a weakness, every single theory has a gap, and you need to be very aware of those gaps because those are the things that you could use for your recommendation. I hope that's clear. Okay, so so functionalism. How about conflict theory? Anybody? Conflict theory.
Good morning po daw.
Sorry, guys, when you talk to me, can you just say your name because apparently I can't see you and I can't see your. I'm sorry, I can't see your bubble lighting up. So, who is this?
Idol po.
Isel. Sorry, Isel.
Yung conflict theory po is Marxist-based social theory po na nag-argue na yung individual po or groups or social classes po is nag interact based sa conflict rather than consensus.
Okay, so everything, thank you so much, Isel. Um, everything that happens in society is a production of the persistent conflict between opposing parties. Okay, so yung Marxism, isang ano lang yan isang strand lang yan sa conflict theory. Because if you think about it, feminism is also part of conflict theory. Why is feminism part of conflict theory? Because if you think about it, feminism is addressing the inequalities or injustices in society. So this is not just about women not having access to what men have access to. This is feminism is a broader idea that for example, it looks into disability, like how are people who have challenges with mobility, how are they able to be integrated in a society. So feminism, please don't get it wrong, feminism is not all about just gender analysis, all right? It's about an analysis of inequality within society as well, but a bit more gendered than others. So critical theory as well is part of conflict theory and such. So what are we saying? That there are opposing forces within a society, and the relationship, this continuous opposition between forces in society, it's not usually just dialectical, all right? Baka kasi nasa isip niyo laging may mabuti, may masama, nag-aaway. That sometimes it's multiple forces within a society that creates the culture that we have. So conflict theory, I hope that makes sense. Okay, next, symbolic interactionism.
Good day po, Evangelista po, Doc.
All right.
Symbolic interactionism po is about how people transmit and receive symbolic communication. Like there's a signs and symbol in which how people interact with one another. Yun po.
Okay. That's a good definition of it. When you use symbolic interactionism, you're focused on what are the existing symbols in society, how are people receiving those symbols, how do they make sense of those symbols and return it to other people who will then in turn interpret those symbols. I hope that makes sense. So symbolic interactionism theory, you're more focused on context. How did people make sense of an event? How do people make sense of a um, how do people make sense? of each other, their relationships and such. I'm thinking of the community pantries right now. It's one of the big topics that we have, right? Symbolic interactionism. If you use symbolic interactionism in understanding the community pantries, the first thing that you would like to ask would be, what meanings do we associate with the community pantries? Is it rebellion? Is it resilience? Is it um, are those local concepts of pagdamay very strong in this context? Anong meaning ina-attach natin dito? Yung mga sumulpot na community pantries, how do they perceive themselves in this phenomenon of community pantries? That is how symbolic interactionism works. Okay, so we're good. We're good with perspectives. Any question? So that we will move if you don't have questions. Questions on perspectives? Kasi undergrad pa lang kayo, so ilimit natin yung ilimit lang muna natin yung orientation nyo, alright? Pag nakarating kayo ng masters ninyo, mas lalawak pa yung mga argumentations nyo about this, because life in sociology does not just revolve around these three theories. But since you're undergrads, it would be great if you could at least be um, uh, efficient in explaining these three items. Kayo ba nag-theory na that focus on these three things? Di ba parang nag-social theory na kayo dapat?
Yes po. Nag-social theory 1 and 2 na po kami.
Okay, so great. So at least meron na kayong understanding of these three variables. Okay, do you have questions on perspectives? None? Are you sure? So, on a more self-indulgent context, saan kaya ako dito sa mga theories na ito? I'm actually a conflict theorist. Obvious siguro yun. Obvious na siguro yun. Initially, I was a classic Marxist. Nung undergrad years ko, classic Marxist talaga ako. And then, pagdating ko ng master's ko, nag-develop ako into a bit of a postmodernist. Ano yung postmodernist? Postmodernism is anti objectivist. What do we mean by that? Postmodernism does not believe that science o- uh, is the prime source of truth, and so because modernism is all about science, so it's a long discussion, but um, and it's a long discussion that is plagued with multiple debates. So the strand that I went to is just um, focused on dismantling science as the prime source of information. So um, anyway, after that, I went into post structuralism. And eventually, I was into critical theory. So, ganun yung ang point ko lang dito is that you don't need to be stuck in one theory for the rest of your life. As you go forward in your research engagements, you would eventually see that, all right, I think my former theory does not fit my agenda anymore. It doesn't fit my worldview anymore. I remember growing up, I was quite religious because that's how my parents raised me. I think most Filipino kids are raised very religious, right? Um, so as a kid, I was very religious. I think as I grew older, I've lost that connection with that religious orientation. And soon enough, I was more a believer of truth that is based on evidence. And so, just like in real life, well, theory is real life too. But what I'm trying to say is, just like in that kind of our lives, theory, the usage of theory evolve as you grow forward. Okay, I hope it makes sense. I'm still conflict theorist. That's one thing. I can't go away from conflict theory. Right now, I think I'm a political economist. So when I say I think, it's because I dabble on several theories as well. So at one point, I was a political ecologist, which is still under conflict theory. So I think I'm going way over here, but what I'm trying to say is, as junior scholars that you are, I want you to somehow find your orientation. There is no better theory than the other, all right? I hope that's something that you would embrace. Kasi somehow someday you might engage in a debate and say, what, functionalist ka, that's so lame. I literally heard people say that at one point. But I'd like you to understand that all of this are theories, all right? Theories, they're ways of explaining the world. Are they facts? No. All right. Evolution is still a theory. A lot of things are still theories. Gravity is not a theory, it's a fact. We know that when you jump off, you're going to fall down. So, unless something is already considered as a fact, you have to be more um, relative, meaning you have to be more um, pliant. That you can change, that you will see that there are gaps to this. Okay, again, all theories have gaps. You can sway your theoretical orientation someday as you go further, as you read more, you're gonna find some better ways of explaining the world. All right, so that's for the perspectives part. Any question before I move on? Should I have started with kamusta kayo? Um, but anyway, thanks to the three people who helped me in providing some context to our perspectives. Now, let's go to the levels, okay? What are the two levels that we have here? We have the micro and the macro. Now, what is your point of analysis? That's something that you have to make sense of as you do your research project. Gaano ba kalaki tong ginagawa kong pag-aaral? Is it a macro analysis? Is it a micro analysis? It doesn't mean that you're studying it doesn't mean that you're doing a national study that it's called a macro study already. It's not about the size of your population, all right? It's about the concept that you are exploring. So, when you're doing a macro analysis, you're looking into how systems, structures, and groups are behaving within a society. If you're doing micro, you're looking at agency, like for example, how think about it. Going back again to the community pantries, if you study community pantries, that will be on a micro analysis. If you are looking at the concept of agency, like how they are responding to a gap in food security, so that's a agency and hence micro. There's also interactions among people, so household interactions, those things are micro in context. Okay, so that being said, can you give me your study and try to make sense if it's micro or macro? I'd like to have three people to answer me for this. Anyone?
Good morning, Ma'am Kalea po.
Hindi mo kinaya yung silence, Kalia?
We were actually thinking, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, since yung thesis ko po na I plan on changing, but I think it's too late, is about assessing the community response on privatization of the indigenous communities. So I think I am going for micro because I am only assessing a small, I mean not small, as one community and its response kasi it's a different ethnicity siya sa large population ng mga indigenous people sa Philippines.
Okay.
And I'm going for the Kankanaey group.
Okay, sure. Tama yung point of analysis. siguro iti-tweak ko lang para lang mas may direction, Kalia, na it's all about agency, right? Because it's a community response, and community response is always within the concept of agency. How do they define themselves? How do they make meaning of certain situations? And hence, it's a micro level analysis, looking at the agency of a particular community. All right, well done.
Okay, thank
Next,
you, ma'am.
next, anyone?
Good morning, Doc. It's Lance or Froy.
Okay.
As I'm looking through this map, I suppose I can relate the level of micro to my thesis that I'm working on, as I am still focusing on the interactions between the family during quarantine, albeit that I am going to tackle different types of families from different walks of lives, different groups. As you said, what's more important is the sole basis of the study, which is the interaction in itself and the development of the relationship during this period.
Very good. Very good. Exactly. That's a Freud. Did I speak to you about joining my project? No.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, doc, you have. But unfortunately, due to my position right now being in another country and as well as having responsibilities along with the family, I'm unable to join the project.
Right, right. Maybe you can dabble with the project at one point. Because this is exactly what we're doing for the mental health study. We're looking at more specifically, Sandy is doing a thesis on this. She's looking at how family structure, family dynamics. Both Sandy and CJ are doing this study. How are family dynamics affecting the mental health of students. So for Sandy, it's about the structure of family. Like, are you in an alternative family structure, or are you in a traditional, like you have a mom and dad kind of scenario? For CJ, it's about how do how no, he's gonna hate me. How do family members? What is the kind of relationship that they have previous to the quarantine, and then during the quarantine, and how do they relate to one another, and how does that affect mental health? So yeah, and yes, you're right, it's a micro analysis. I hope you could collaborate with CJ and Sandy, maybe not even with the project, but look into the works of CJ and Sandy, because that could inform your work. All right.
Noted, very much noted. Thank you so much, doc.
All right. Last person. You're all micro. Anybody doing macro?
Hello, ma'am.
Who is this?
Ma'am.
Yes.
Pauline po. Pauline Sangko.
Songko.
Ma'am, I have a bit of a question though.
Okay.
Hello. In the on macro level, does it look towards the difference and similarities of an individual in a group, or does it only understand the whole concept of a group and what their experience or behavior are?
I'm not so sure I understood your question, all right? But I'm going to try to answer it. So, for example, one of my projects right now
Okay.
on humanitarian response, all right? Local humanitarian leaders. So, if I'm going to just do a study of Baseco Compound, which is one of the community organizations I'm looking into, that would be a micro analysis, because I'm just looking into their group dynamics, okay, and how they're responding to the COVID scenario. But since this project is looking into several groups of community leaders and how they interact with the systems of government so that they could survive the COVID pandemic, that made it macro. Am I making sense?
Yes. I get it now.
So if you're looking into the unit, a smaller unit, and how they interact with one another, that's a micro level study. Now, if you're looking into even that one unit and how it interacts with a structure, it immediately transcends the micro and moves into the macro analysis. Am I making sense?
Yes. I get it now.
So,
Yeah.
yung dissertation ko, my dissertation, ano yung ginawa ko doon? It sounds like a micro-analysis because I look into the food security of older adults in Bosaico compound. But how did it become a macro-analysis? Because I just used that experience, their lived experience, to interrogate food program, land use, and a whole lot more of issues. Urban planning. I located all of those macro issues within the lived experiences of people. That made it a macro analysis. Again, it's not about the number of people you're looking into, but how you are making sense of their experiences. Yung kay Kalia, for example, how would that be, how can we turn that from a micro analysis to a macro analysis? Gagamitin lang ni Kalia as point of reference yung Kankanae group, their response, right? But if her thesis moves beyond just those response and interrogate state level of oppression, pag naggawa na siya ng historical analysis ng state level oppression of indigenous people, pag pinasok na ni Kalia yung kwento ng help ni Kalia, CADT, Certificate of Ancestral Domain, pag pinasok na ni Kalia yung issues ng land grabbing, nagiging macro analysis na yung study ni Kalia. Does that make sense? Nawala na si Songko.
Hello?
Yes.
Medyo choppy po ba?
Oh,
Medyo nawawala.
did you hear my
Yeah, I heard it, pero a bit choppy po. Pero I still understand the I get it now, like micro and macro level.
okay.
I'm still quite trying to understand if in my research topic, it's about public school students studying in a module learning program.
Mhm.
So for me, I think it's a micro level.
But
Since
what we're going to analyze?
what we're going to analyze, well, basically in my research, I'm trying to focus on the experiences and their whole their interaction with the modular learning program, if they are going with it or against it, if they aren't if it's not applicable to what's happened, like COVID, if they have lack of communication. I'm looking more of in that direction than looking for another problem or
Okay,
another
I
subculture.
get it. Sorry, before I continue, Aisel, was I choppy a while ago, or was it Miss Songko?
Okay naman po sa end ko.
Okay, so it's the connect. Aisel, you have to let me know if I'm breaking. All right.
Okay po.
All right. Thank you. So that being said, your project is micro. Why? Because you're just focused on the experiences of the students. How does that become a macro? If those experiences that you're discussing is just a what do you call this? A jumping board for you to interrogate the whole system of online education. Kung yung bulk ng research mo would interrogate the gaps of the online learning protocols of DepEd, then that one becomes a macro study. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
All right.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. So there. But nobody gave me a macro answer. Lahat kayo micro ang sagot. Anybody who's doing a macro study? What do you think?
Ano lang po, feeling ko po ako, hindi ko sure. Yung sa akin po kasi is yung sa SAP, sa Social Ameliation Program. And feeling ko po magiging macro siya kasi feeling ko po based dun sa makukuha kong data sa kahit sa one community lang po siya is feeling ko po ma-identify yung gaps nung SAP na nangyari po. Hindi ko sure.
Okay. So, in your case, Aisel, medyo tama yung direction. Tama ka, although isang community lang pag-aaralan mo, pero dahil you're going to interrogate a macro, a structural issue, it becomes a macro analysis. Kasi paano ba nangyayari yon? Pag sinusulat mo na, so halimbawa, in my researches, I would usually tell a story. I would usually tell a story of one person. And for initially when you do that, you're saying, oh, microanalysis to. But no, after I tell the story of that one person, immediately I go into the policies. So magpa-policy review ako. Sasabihin ko anong nangyari, bakit gutom ang mga tao. Kasi noong 19 ganyan-ganyan, yung Rice Importation Act ganyan-ganyan. So I would look into the policies that were created, the implementing rules and regulations created, and how all of these macro systems affected the lived experiences of that individual. Okay? So for example, in your case, Aisel, kukwento mo yung SAP, yung experience ng isang tao sa SAP. That's micro. How does that become macro? Magiging macro lang yan kapag tinignan mo na yung concept ng 4Ps. Yung mismong structure ng 4Ps. Yung conditional cash transfer. And then compare that to the implementation of, let's say, other countries. Why is the 4Ps a problematic context in our country? And now it transcended that period of, let's say, pre-COVID era. Now in the COVID era, yung mga gaps ng 4Ps implementation then have become still the gaps that we're addressing today. So pandemic or not, the SAP, the Social Amelioration Program, which is related as well to the 4Ps, remain a problematic project of the government. Pag ganun yung analysis mo, macro analysis yon. Make sense?
Okay, yes po. Thank you.
All right, all right. So I hope all of you guys who are listening today, I hope you're understanding now how you can make, how you can frame your study from the theory, what you're using, to the level that you are evaluating. All of this should be present in your research projects. Okay, so tapos na tayo sa levels and then perspectives. Now let's go to the bigger chunk of this discussion, the research strategies. Okay, so dalawa lang naman ang papupuntahan niyo muna. Again, mas complex pa dito ang sociology, practice of sociological research. But for the sake of your level as undergrad students, dito lang muna tayo mag-focus, okay? Kasi the point is, merong mixed method, merong mixed sequential method, marami pa tayong methods, all right? But for the sake of your undergrad thesis, gusto lang naman natin makagraduate kayo ng 4-year degree, right? And that, let's just focus on this dichotomy of research strategies. Yung dichotomy na yan would be on qualitative and quantitative. Can anyone give me like a top of the head response on the difference of quali and quanti?
Good morning po. I'm Trisha Osaito po, ma'am.
Sorry, who is
I'm Trisha Osaito po.
it? How come Trisha Ozaita?
Osaito po.
Ozaita. All right, Trisha.
Yung qualitative po, mini-measure po nila yung conclusion nila by interpreting the data. So yung quantitative po, measured by numbers or statistics.
All right. Thank you so much, Trisha. Dalawang madaling explanation lang yan. Anong klaseng data meron ka? When you're doing qualitative research, your data would most likely be textual. Kasi ang ano mo, ang focus mo would be on words, on stories of people. When you're doing quantitative, mostly your data set would be numbers, as Trisha mentioned, because here you're looking at how many people said the same thing. Okay? So, yan yung generic differentiation natin ng quali and quanti. Now, here would be a more um, nuanced the dichotomy of quali and quanti. Nakikita niyo dito sa pillar na meron tayo, ito yung mga opposite sides. I'm actually not so much a fan of this dichotomy, but is it good for undergrad knowledge? Definitely. Is it sufficient for higher level of sociological practice? Not necessarily. So, but this is a good, kumbaga, ito yung mga staple. If you want to call yourself a sociologist, then these are the staple learnings that you should have. Okay, so tignan muna natin. Ano yung difference nila, yung mga opposing context dito? We have interpretivist and then positivist. Okay, positivist ka ba or interpretivist? Have you ever heard those lines asked of you? Never? Siguro dahil matanda na ako kaya ganun. Parang lagi naming kaaway ay mga positivist. As an anthropologist, that's something. I'm not very much a fan of positivist. Ano ba yung positivist? Ano ba yung interpretivist? Ako, interpretivist ako. A lot of sociologists that I know of are positivists. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Positivists, you know that truth and reality are pretty much set. Does that make sense? While an interpretivist looks into reality as more relative, more malleable, that there is no such thing as one reality. Okay? So pag positivist ka, there is one reality. Pag interpretivist ka, there are multiple realities. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So, kapag the same topic, how do we look at this? The same topic. Okay, online education. Gamitin natin kay Pauline. Online education. Kapag positivist ka, meron kang markers of successful online learning. Na itong markers na to, you believe are applicable to all kinds of students and all types of scenario. Okay? At napoprove mo yan through the numerical data that you have. Kapag interpretivist ka, you will dump that let's say set of markers and create your own markers based on how the people you've talked to made sense of their experience. Okay? So, halimbawa, positivist, kailangan nakapag-comply ng mga outputs, actively engaging in conversations in synchronous classes, yung mga ganon. So, yun yung quantitative measures mo of a successful online learning. How about qualitative, interpretivist? Ang markers mo ng, possible markers mo ng successful online learning would be, I was able to attend. Baka kasing baba ng ganun. I was able to attend the online class. Why is it a marker of success? Hindi ka malang nakipag-usap sa teacher. You did not do anything. You were just able to attend. It was a marker of success probably for that student. Why? Because number one, there's internet connectivity challenge. Number two, home issue. Like, nag-aaway yung magulang niya sa likod and then nakapag-focus pa rin siya sa class niya kahit na magulo yung background scenario niya. That, for that student, became a marker of success. So, you see, in interpretivist context, reality is plural. In quantitative positivist perspective, reality is singular. Does that? I hope that that makes more sense. Okay, now linked together with this, medyo maliit lang yung differentiation nito ha. Linked together with this context are constructivist and objectivist. Okay, objectivist means that again, following the concept of positivistic perspective, yung objectivist sinasabi na um, ang hirap ikwento nito, no? Teka, alam niyo ba kung ano ibig sabihin ng epistemology, ontology? No? Am I taking the silence as a no? Trisha, do you know the difference between epistemology and ontology?
No po, ma'am.
Na-discuss niyo ba sa social research theory or something?
Hindi po.
Okay. May philo course ba kayo?
Po?
Meron ba kayong philosophy course?
Wala po.
Sayang. Kasi, just like what my philosophy friends would say, philosophy is the mother of all sciences. I don't refute that kasi naniniwala ako doon kasi they're the ones who create who created and started this process of us thinking, you know, the concept of thinking. Hang on, somebody gave me a chat. Oh, it's an elective. It's not required anymore. Sayang. If you can get an elective of philosophy, can you please do that? It will help you as a sociologist. Kesa kumuha kayo ng kung ano nung elective, kumuha kayo ng philosophy elective. Alright?
We did po nung first year, Doc.
Talaga. Sino yan?
Bethalina po.
Oh, Bethalina. Sinong teacher mo sa philosophy?
Si Dean... Si Dean Vasco po. Dean Vasco. Oh my God.
Nahiya naman ako sa'yo, Bethalina. Nahiya sa'yo si Dean, di mo siya naalala.
Sorry po.
Napakalaki present si Dean Vasco din. Okay. Nag-aral ba kayo ng mga epistemology, ontology? Hindi, no?
Wala po, Doc.
Ano pinag-aralan nyo?
Philo-anthro po yung naging elective ko. Mostly yung basics, yung karma, ganun po.
Okay, sige. Useless para sa usapan natin yung ganung information. Oo. So, sige, thank you so much, Bethalina. Kung kaya nyo mag-enroll ng mga advanced philosophy courses as elective, I highly suggest you do that. Naalala ko, nag-enroll ako dati kay Randy David. Hindi ko alam kung kilala niyo si Randy David. Kung hindi, nakakahiya kayo. Dapat kilala niyo dahil isa yun sa mga gods in sociology, sa Philippine sociology. Naalala ko na nag-enroll ako sa kanya ng sociological theories. Hindi ko naman alam na sobra palang magpabasa si Doc Randy, si Prof. Randy. Ang reading materials namin dati would be about 5 books. 5 books. Sorry. 5 books in 1 month. Pero yung readings, like the articles, parang nasa 10 articles per week. Nakakabaliw, parang yun na lang ginagawa ko sa buhay. Pero that helped me a lot in forming my theoretical orientation. Kaya hindi ako nahihiya makipag-argumento sa theory kasi that was a very difficult training. You have to have trainings like that. You have to embrace trainings like that if you want to be good social scientist. Yung iba kasi sa inyo, hindi naman sociology talaga magiging ending ng buhay nyo, right? But some of you would go into geography or whichever course. Yung si Bethalina, I remember, might go to social work. These theories are still going to be very relevant when you go to other disciplines. So anyway, ano ba yung epistemology, ano yung ontology? So epistemology is the philosophy of philosophy of ideas, of thought. Okay, ontology is a philosophy of reality. Okay, kaya may hierarchy yan: epistemology, ontology, and then theory. So kaya magkakadugtong lang din yan. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say here. So yung epistemology is your philosophy of thought. How are you making sense of um, of an idea? How are you making sense of a concept? Now, ontology is how do you make sense of reality? So, um, in epistemology, we said ideas could be interpreted, interpretivist. And the other side, ideas are cannot be interpreted because they're given. They're there. And then for ontology, you have constructivist. We construct reality. And on the other side, objectivist ontology, reality is already there for people to experience. Ganun yung differentiation nito. Okay? Does that make sense? Let me know if it's not making sense so I could elaborate further. If you become silent like this, I'm thinking that you're understanding my point. Any clarification? Clarify niyo na to ngayon dahil meron kayong graded output during the breakout session. Wala? Sure? Okay. So, paano yung theory? So, let's go now to the theory. Sorry, let's delve a bit more on this ontology context. How is reality constructed? And the answer to this is people create their own realities. There is, for example, a structure, and people respond to that structure, and that creates the reality for them. But if you're an objectivist, you're going to say, oh, this reality dictates the response of people. It's the opposite. All right? Does that make sense? You got. Ito yung hirap pag online learning eh. I cannot look you in the eyes and gauge whether you are understanding my point or not. So you have to let me know. The only way that I could help you is if you're transparent with me. Do we have questions on this? None?
Hello, Doc. Would it be all right for you to repeat the point that you just mentioned? I'm writing it down.
Which, I'm sorry, Froy, I kind of ran
The
to
one
which one of those things that I'm thinking about.
just before you asking the question about people make their own realities and how they react
Okay,
to that.
so you're talking about ontology. Do you want me to
Yes.
do that part? All right. So again, with ontology, on the qualitative side, reality is something that a person creates for himself, regardless of the structures that are there. So here is where agency comes in, if you think about it, right? Because when there are structures, sure, but the structures are the pressure that the structure gives on individuals are malleable because eventually it's the individual who interprets the structure and responds to the structure. And that's what we say constructivist. Let's use a more tangible point of analysis, the community pantries. I'm sorry that I keep on using this one because it's the most pervading point in my timelines in social media. So the community pantries. If you use a constructivist ontology on this, the community pantries are people's response to food insecurity. Community pantries are very local. Kasi meron ng mga kwento, right? There are several things going on online saying that, oh, this is not so new because other countries are doing this, and this is just a replication of those things. It is still new. It's still ingenious to the Philippine context. Why? because the cultural context by which these pantries came about, all of those were constructed by people and how they envision their realities. So when you look into constructivist ontology, you're looking at how do people create their own realities. People would say, okay, better, probably a better example of this. Even in the Philippine context, community pantries are being seen differently. Okay, people associate different realities to these community pantries. One group of people saying this is something that is related to political affiliations, like being um, a communist and such. And they believe that, truly believe that, wholeheartedly believe that. There's a group of people who say this is just out of goodwill. Filipinos are very strong on their context of pagdamay. And they truly believe that as well. Which reality is valid? And the answer is both realities are valid, because those realities are the realities that people created for themselves. Okay, we're good. Next part is on the objectivist. On the objectivist side, you're saying that reality is not malleable. Reality is not something that you can construct from below to the top. You're going to say that reality is there, it's embedded, it's something that you will just experience. There will be variance in experience, but the reality that the reality is already there. It's just the extent of your experience of that reality that makes it different. For example, the reality in an objectivist context, probably you're going to say that the bottom line here is that I'm thinking about how to do objectivist in community pantry. The bottom line here is that there is food insecurity. There's just food insecurity. And people have created pantries to address food insecurity. That's your objectivist version of that. Now, how different is this in a constructivist? In a constructivist, yes, sure, there's food insecurity, but the way that you're understanding the response to that food insecurity will be of different orientation. Kasi dun sa objectivist, you're just saying there's food insecurity, hence people created the pantries. There are 350 pantries now, and that's all because of food insecurity. In constructivist ontology, you're saying, yes, there's food insecurity, but more than that, the community pantries could also be a sign of rebellion. The community pantries could also be a sign of care. You know, you have multiple meanings that you've associated to community pantries as opposed to objectivist. Does that make better sense, Roy?
Yes, indeed, Doc. So more or less, constructivists would explore more possibilities, maybe theories and connections from different individuals, that could more or less differ from person to person,
Right.
on their background, history, experiences as well. While objectivist more or less focuses like on a common theme, or not really theme, but a certain quote unquote reality that everyone can objectively see. For example, like the table set with food, it's there. They don't question whether or not, like, why did they do this. It's just the reality, quote unquote reality, that they observe.
Very well said. Very well said. Exactly. Um, in fact, if you push further your point of analysis, which is the table, I like that point, Freud. So in an interpretivist perspective, I'm sorry, in the constructivist perspective, you're also going to say, oh, look at how different the tables are set. For example, in urban places, usong-uso pa rin yung noodles and canned goods and such. And then you compare that with the community pantry in Mindoro, wherein they serve black rice, fish, and gulay, all of those things. And you already say, see, there's just so much difference. Just in short, in a constructivist research, You can just even focus on the tables itself, interpret the contents of the table to make sense of the phenomenon of community pantry. In an objectivist perspective, you're just gonna count how many tables came up, where are the locations of these tables, and when did this come out. So it's about what, when, where, what can you actually pinpoint as objectively real. So there. Thank you very much for that
Uh,
good example of the table.
I'd
I
like to add, Doc. One time I was scrolling through Twitter, and I was looking through like this one Facebook post about another community pantry, but the contents therein, the table, were a lot of alcoholic drinks and finger food, and some would even say it's called chill numan. And
I've not seen that, Troy, but that's really interesting.
mm, and there's the reaction that some of the people had were like questioning whether the legitimacy of community pantries are actually helping, or is this just an excuse for some people to continue to disregard how harsh the situation of quarantine is. Like some people thinking it might be a joke, or some people were saying that this is like, their way of trying to contribute to society, on how people do need a break. Some people do need some time to like forget about. That's why they would offer alcoholic drinks instead of your usual perishable foods.
Mhm. What you're doing right now, Freud, is interpretivist, constructivist orientation already. So that's a very good example of how you use constructivist ontology for a research. You look into the contents of the table, make sense of why the table has those types of contents. That's definitely that. When you try to bounce back to objectivist, you're just going to say, okay, so there are 350 tables, and let's say 200 of them are all canned goods related, and around whatever number are mostly on organic stuff. So you could do that in an objectivist ontology. Again, epistemology, the philosophy of thought. Ontology, i'm just I'm just doing this in the easiest way as I can. Okay, if you want to know more about this, I provided the link in the spreadsheet that I'm about to share with you. Okay, and then ontology, philosophy of what is, how do you understand reality? And then of course the theory. As undergrad students, medyo andito lang naman talaga kayo, all right, sa theory. Then you're gonna say, oh my God, then why did you have to make us go through epistemology and all? Because this is very important so that you could understand how you're thinking about things. As researchers, it's very important that we know our positionality. Okay. For me, I'm very clear with myself that I am an interpretivist, I'm a constructivist, and yes, I am an inductive theorist. What does that mean to be an inductive theorist as opposed to a deductive theorist? In quantitative research, what you do most of the time is that you test existing theories. Okay, there are existing theories, and you're going to test them. Is this theory workable in this type of setting? And if it's a yes, then you say, okay, the theory holds. If it's a no, then why does the theory not hold in this situation? That is quantitative process. That is deductive theorizing. How different is it with qualitative? With qualitative, it's going to be inductive. When you say inductive, it means that you are theorizing from the ground to the you're theorizing from the ground, from the results of your data. You're going to develop a new theory. It may not be really really new, but it would be a theory that is relevant to that particular case that you've studied. Okay, so for those of you doing micro level of analysis, most definitely you would be gearing towards an inductive theory most of the time. But don't, please don't think that since you're micro then definitely inductive. All right, I'm just saying that in most cases it happens like that. It could also happen, for example, I don't know, for example, in Isel's case, she could also do a micro analysis or a micro level of analysis, and do in deductive theory. Like she's going to use a conflict, an existing conflict theory, like I don't know, whatever kind, and then apply it in the experience of a community. So see, it's a small unit, and yet it became a deduct. It used deductive theory. It's possible. All right. So inductive, deductive theory. If you're doing deductive theory, you're examining a theory and how it applies to your study. Inductive theory, you're creating your new theory based on your new set of data. I hope those things are clear. Okay, so whew, that was difficult. Okay, so let's go now to the aims. Okay, what are the aims of your project? Do we have questions about the pillar? Any other question about the pillar? None? Are you sure? Okay. So, by the way, everyone, please let me know if you agree or disagree. There's a problem with space usage in our Blackboard. So, what I decided to do was to record the lectures that I have, and then I created like a YouTube channel where I could upload all my talks, all my lectures. Would you be okay that I upload this lecture there so that it would be easier for you to access the lecture? She says immediately, yes. Okay, thank you, Zes. Anybody who's against that, like you feel like your privacy will be violated because, as I've said, it's going to be on YouTube. And you would typically speak with me like this. Anybody who will feel like this is not a good idea? That's the only idea I kind of thought of. Anybody who's not for this? Your silence is I'm taking your silence as a yes that you approve of it. Aisel, can you speak for the class if you approve or not?
Feeling ko naman po walang disagree na hindi po sila nag-react.
Okay, sure. All right, so if that is the case, then after this lecture, I will upload this in the YouTube account, and then I'll just post the link in our Blackboard class. I think that will be easier for you to access it. All right, so going back to our lecture. Now we're done with the pillar of quali and quanti. Let's now go to the aims. What are the aims of your study? If you're doing quantitative, I'd like you to look into this very important segment. When you're doing quantitative, you would like to generalize. Generalization is a key feature of quantitative research because you're able to do a good number of representation, and you've done this with scientific rigor of randomizing and a whole lot more. You can create a generalization for the entire population. Kaya nga, di ba, yung mga statistics natin, we usually have let's say 1,200 to 1,400 participants of a Pulse Asia survey, and yet they would say 61% of Filipinos said. Why are they able to say that? Because quantitative research, because of the capacity of statistics, can produce generalization. Okay, they can do causal inference, meaning did one event make the other event happen? That's something that quantitative research can do. If that's your thing, you have to do quantitative research. Realism, this is the reality for a general population. All right, and of course you can do measurements. How is this different when you do quali? This is the reason why I've never said in any of my talks that Filipinos said this. I would usually say a group of Filipinos said this. Why? Qualitative can never ever generalize. Why? Because you only observe, you only are describing a small group of people. Okay? And most of my studies are qualitative in nature. So I can never say a group, I can never say this is the Filipino sentiment. One project that I had that I was able to say, the Filipino, was my WHO funded project on Filipino social values. Why? Because that one used statistics. So it was a mixed method. There was qualitative when we interviewed patient groups and community leaders, but at the same time, we also did quantitative, which is we did statistics. That's why we can generalize. So, what's the aim of your study? Let's go back to um, no, all of you are already saying that. Miss Zuniga, are you here? Trisha, right? It's
Good
Trisha.
morning po, Doc.
Yeah. How about you? What do you think? What's the aim of your study? Is it to generalize? Is it to describe a particular group?
I think po, Doc, since nagre-revolve po yung study ko sa family dynamics din ng parenting, tapos to the political structure po, kasi parang ang study ko po yung effect po ng parenting styles sa political preferences ng mga students, yung hinahanap po nilang ideal government leaders. So I think pasok din
Might
po
hirap.
siya. Opo. Kasi parang from micro to macro din po yung naiisip ko.
Pero are you going to be quantitative, qualitative?
Actually, I'm not sure pa po. Pero I think mas magiging relevant po if qualitative siya.
Talaga ba? So,
Or
kasi kung ako magiging advisor mo, halimbawa lang ha, kung ako yung advisor mo, I would say, nako, quantitative tong study na to. Kasi meron kang set parameters na ng parenting style, right? May mga defined categories na yung parenting style. And then, you want to have correlation eh. Correlation, yun pa lang, sagot mo na kagad, oh. Ayan, oh, causal inference.
Oh, okay po.
Wala yan dito sa Quali eh. Quali cannot tell you na, yes, yung child rearing practices would affect the political stance of a person. Walang ganong capacity ang qualitative, all right? So, quantitative, because you wanted to have a causal inference. Did this factor affect this context? That's immediately quantitative.
Okay po, Doc.
Does that make sense for you?
Yes po. Thank you po.
All right. Okay. So, that's the aims. All right. Let's go to the methods. Ayan na. Don't worry, class. I will be discussing the nitty-gritty details of this as we go on, but I just wanted us to do this map because it will literally let you see, all right, this is where I'm going. It's very important to know where you're going. Okay. So, methods. Let's go to the methods. You can immediately see here the difference in the methods, right? So for quantitative, because you're dealing with numbers, obviously it's going to have statistical analysis, causal models, surveys, content analysis, structured observation. Lahat ito quantitative. Observation, hindi, and you might say, wait, observation, isn't it a qualitative method? Yes, it is. But when it's structured, like you have a set of points to observe, it becomes quantitative. Like you're going to say, how many times do parents talk to their children about democracy? That's already a structured observation. You're going to say at least 5 times in 1 month they had conversations like this. That's quantitative already. Okay. Now for methods of qualitative, you would have interviews, ethnography, focus group discussions, and then grounded theory. If you remember last semester, I did a discussion with you about grounded theory. Grounded theory essentially is that you're just observing everything first. You don't have any agenda. You're just observing. And from that observation, you're going to create your objectives and you're going to create your analysis. So I'm going to discuss more about this as we go forward in this course. All right. So I think I've covered everything. What are the immediate results of quali and quanti? For quantitative, you get to have categories. You can develop categories. You can identify social facts. Okay? So yung mga demography, yung mga 9 out of 10, whatever, ganyan. That's the beauty of quantitative research. Now, for qualitative research, here, your immediate data set would be the subjective meanings. What does having COVID mean to, to a poor person? What does having COVID mean? What does quarantine mean to a middle class person? Those things are the types of results that you get in qualitative research. Talk and actions. So what words are so meaningful to a group of people? All right. Is this clear for everyone? Yes. Yes. Any questions? Are you sure? None? Okay, so I am going to put you now in breakout sessions. You will need to use your UST. You will need to use your UST email to be able to answer this activity. Hang on. I'm going to stop recording now.